guys, it's Jordan and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a series review on the Grisha Trilogy by Leigh Bardugo, which includes Shadow and Bone, I gave a 4 out of 5 stars, Siege and Storm, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars, and Ruin and Rising, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. So this series takes place in a fictional world that is based very heavily or influenced by Imperial Tsarist Russia. It is a multi-continent, multi-country world. However, this story primarily takes place in Ravka. Within this world, we also have humans and this other group of people known as the Grisha, who are magical people with superpowers. They are broken down into 3 different categories. The second army is a Grisha army. And then our main character, Alina, is a 17-year-old soldier in the first army, which is made up of humans. Her and her best friend Mal have been together since they were small children. They were raised in an orphanage in southern Ravka, and they get drafted into the first army when they are in their teens. The book opens with the 2 of them and their regiment working with a regiment of the second army to cross this expanse of land in Ravka known as the Shadowfold, or it's this area of darkness which is home to many a monster who likes to eat humans. As they are beginning to enter into the Shadowfold, an event involving Alina and Mal occurs that sets the entire story into motion. So let's first talk about the world. I felt like the world was super rich and well done because it's based on Tsarist Russia. I could very clearly picture what their dress was like, what the people looked like, how their buildings were structured, the look of their art and such. I really thought that that painted a beautiful picture for the backdrop of the story. I also really enjoyed the whole Grisha aspect of this, the way that she did that magic system and those powers. They weren't people who had unlimited amounts of powers. I liked that they were kind of categorized based on what they could do. I liked that some of them were more of like tinkering, who were really good at building things and working with metals and chemicals and things like that. I liked that there were people who were really good with elements because I love elemental magic, and then the people who could control the body. That was probably one of my favorite parts of this trilogy, was the Grisha and their powers and their political structure and how they function. It's really what ultimately persuaded me to read this story in the first place. If you haven't been on my channel for a while, then you might not know that I initially read Six of Crows before reading the Grisha Trilogy, and I hadn't really had any interest in the Grisha Trilogy. But then upon reading Six of Crows, there is a main character in that story who is a Grisha, and I was fascinated by her. I absolutely loved her. She was my favorite character. She was really the only part of Six of Crows that I liked. I was thinking to myself, how would I not like the Grisha books? They're the Grisha books, so they have to do more with this Grisha structure and these Grisha people, and of course the minute that I picked them up and gave them a chance, I absolutely fell in love with the Grisha. So I'm not surprised at all that I enjoyed that, and it was my favorite aspect of these books. But I also really did like the characters as well. They're very beloved characters, especially the main villain of the story, the Darkling. I was going into the story expecting to love the Darkling, and I was expecting to really hate Mal because a lot of people seem to not like him. To my surprise, it was the opposite. While I think the Darkling is a wonderful villain, very well done, very morally ambiguous, very for the greater good, Voldemort-esque, like he's doing it for the greater good, but he has a warped sense of what the greater good actually is. So he's a very fascinating character, and I really loved learning about him and his past. It wasn't this epic love interest that I was expecting for Alina, and I ended up really feeling uncomfortable with people shipping them together because it's pretty clear that Alina is not a huge fan of the Darkling. However, with Mal, I loved him. I rooted for him the entire series. The series opens with Alina having a huge crush on Mal, and Mal is like a ladies' man, and you know, they're best friends, so he doesn't see her that way. And I was rooting for them the whole time. I really liked them together. I liked how they worked with each other. I liked how they support each other. I just really liked their dynamic, how they bounce off each other because they're very different characters, and I really liked how they were still able to be friends despite being so vastly different. And then in the second book, we meet this wonderful character, Nikolai, who I had expected to love, and I did. He is a very snarky, witty character. He has some of the best lines in the series. There are so many amazing moments in the dialogue, and most of them coming from Nikolai. He was this like comic relief that the series needed. He has this swagger and pompous nature to him, and I just really enjoyed every scene that had Nikolai in it. And I wish we would have seen more of Nikolai. He got gypped just a little bit. So let's go ahead and talk about the plot. The plot was very well balanced. There were moments when it was really action-packed and things were moving really, really quickly. I just needed to know what was going to happen next. There were also much slower, calmer moments to the plot. So it had a nice, like, roller coaster effect almost. Had a good balance between having a lot of action, having the quieter, softer moments where we can really delve into the characters. That was a really great inclusion of both types of storytelling. For example, in book 2, it had a really high-octane beginning, really helped it overcome the second book slump because the first part of the book was so action-packed. And then it had a really action-packed ending. At the middle, we see the characters struggling with decisions they've made and having internal struggles and struggling with each other. I am more of a plot-based reader, so I'm always going to pick plot over the characters. When it's a really good plot with really good characters that I can really root for, that's like the best. Something else I really wanted to touch on was Six of Crows versus the Grisha Trilogy. Like I mentioned, I did read Six of Crows first before reading the Grisha Trilogy, and I really didn't care for it. I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5 stars. With that being said, I feel like the Grisha Trilogy is a much better introduction to this world than Six of Crows. There are lots of little moments in Six of Crows, not outright spoilers, but you appreciate them more when you've read the Grisha Trilogy. For example, I know that there is a scene in Six of Crows where one of the main characters is naming her knives after saints, and apparently that is really hard-hitting for people who have read the Grisha Trilogy because it's a throwback, whereas when I read it, it meant nothing to me. Moments that Leigh Bardugo purposely did, it's gonna go right over your head. I also think that this world does a much better job of explaining powers of Grisha, the structure of the Grisha politically and like hierarchical and how they came to be. It explains how the world became the state that it is in Six of Crows. And so without reading the Grisha Trilogy, you don't really know why the world is in the state that it is. Somewhat explained to you, but obviously seeing it play out entirely like makes it more impactful when you read Six of Crows. This Jorda Parem drug in Six of Crows, you actually get introduced to it for the first time in Siege and Storm. You also get introduced to one of the main characters of the Six of Crows crew in Siege and Storm. Personally, I don't feel like you can read Six of Crows without reading the Grisha Trilogy because I feel like it lays such a beautiful foundation for that. So while it's marketed as being an individual duology from this trilogy, just taking place in the same world, I don't know how you can say it's separate. I've also heard from people that there are several more tie-ins between the Grisha Trilogy and Six of Crows in Crooked Kingdom. More character appearances, there's more references to the Grisha Trilogy, so how are you really going to appreciate those things if you haven't read the Grisha Trilogy? There's also some like minor spoilers for the end of the Grisha Trilogy in Six of Crows, so I knew who was going to end up in power at the end of the Grisha Trilogy because I had read Six of Crows and it tells you. If you've never heard of the Grisha Trilogy and you don't know the characters' names, you would never know if that was a spoiler because the name would mean nothing to you. Once I finished this, I was so excited to reread Six of Crows. I was just like jumping out of my seat. I could not wait to dive back into that world. I hope I love it so much more now that I have this background, this foundation set. I love when authors plant things in their stories from previous books and tie things together. I'm hopefully going to enjoy the heck out of Six of Crows so much more this time around. And the last thing that I think I want to touch on is the ending. A lot of people seem to not like the ending. I've heard several reviews saying that they did not like the third book, did not like how it ended, did not like where things went. An unpopular opinion again. I loved the ending. I was rooting for the characters. I loved what they did. I love how it ended. It brought tears to my eyes. I just thought it made sense in the scope of what the characters wanted from each other, from themselves. They were still pursuing the roles that they had been in the entire trilogy, but just on a much smaller, confined scale. So I would definitely recommend this trilogy to anybody who likes fantasy, who likes Russian-inspired fantasy, who likes people with superpowers. Also, if you've liked Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom and you want more from that world, I'd recommend reading this. I think you'll necessarily like this trilogy as much as Six of Crows because I just feel like Six of Crows has better writing. It's her most recent work, so she's grown a lot as an author since writing these, so I just feel like that alone sets Six of Crows above this, but I still really enjoyed this. Those are all my thoughts, opinions, and feelings on the Grisha Trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. I'd love to know what you thought of this if you've read it in the comments down below and how you would compare it to Six of Crows if you've read both. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I'll talk to you very soon. Bye!